Thank you to the technology gods, first off, for this amazing capability here. So my name is Nala again, and I'm here to share with you about the work that I do with grief and ancestors, and put together a little slideshow here as part of learning how to be more grief literate. This is part of a learning for our grief ceremony that we're about to dive into together. So I want everyone here to hold this in this container of intention and prayer that we've already set up. And we'll take a few questions at the end. So honoring our grief for this world is why we're here today. We live in this culture, the overculture, it's often called. Some people call it an anti-culture. I'm a nutritionist as well, and I sometimes refer to what our society instead of a culture, because a lot of times it behaves as a dysbiosis, which is a nutritional term, when the culture in your gut is a little bit off. We call that a dysbiosis. So things that are like a monoculture obviously are an oxymoron, because they actually kill culture. When you spray a field with pesticides or grow only one crop, kills culture. So it's an oxymoron. So our culture these days, our society, tends to regard grief with dishonor, right? You're taught to, we are taught in modern Western cultures to think of grief as a pathology. So we're going to be reframing grieving as a skill, as what Francis Weller, who is one of my teachers, beautiful teacher, what he calls a core human faculty. So it's not really, it's not even a noun, it's more like a verb. And the type of approach that I'm taking here is very somatic. So when we say we're grieving, that's this whole complex of sensations that happens in our body, rather than just an emotion or just a label in the DSM where it's labeled perhaps as depression or anxiety or some other disorder. It's actually a process and a verb and a living embodied experience. That's the somatic part. So I wanted to, maybe you guys can type into the chat what you see when you look at this, the words that are around the globe there.
Heart, art, earth, heart, heart, earth, hearth, art, here, hearth, here, ear.
Yes. Hear the earth. Yes, so thank you. I even see the word theater in there if I squint, And I just want to point out that this isn't a coincidence. And this is because the word earth, if you go all the way back to the Indo-European roots of this word, you find the root air. And air is, you might see that, for example, in the word in Spanish, ser, which is to be. And that is because the word earth was created out of our being. And the same thing as the word art, like as in thou art, you are something, you art. And there's another root, erg, that starts to move and change over the eons. And erg is the root of the word ergistai. I don't speak Greek, so forgive my pronunciation there, but that is the word for music. So theater, art, music, being, and the earth are all interrelated. So coming together to be with one another, to make sound, to make music, to do art, to do theater. These things are part of how we understand our own bodies and how we relate to earth. So hearing our ear, hearing the earth through our own bodies, through the cries that are coming out of us, is very, very, very important, you know, and that's one of the reasons why that is so suppressed in our overculture. We're trying to bring new culture back by bringing these more ancient wailing, expressive arts traditions back into back into our community here, where we are brewing up some new culture. So I'm going to move quickly through here. Hopefully folks are already familiar with the concept of somatics, which is different than the word body is the word soma. It's the way that we experience ourselves from the inside out, and nobody else can understand our experience of our own bodies except us. Well, and perhaps our ancestors and our allies, but meaning the other living humans in the room don't really get what it's like to be us. And so there's this responsibility that we have to work deeply within ourselves, and to this gift that we're given to be able to go deeply into our bodies is often, that's another place where our culture, our overculture stops that feeling, and we're encouraged to dissociate. So we're using the embodiment practices here, which in this case is grief work, deeply feeling our grief as a way to come back in to somatic relationship with our bodies. Not only do we come back into relationship with our bodies, but as we saw in the first slide, we come back in relationship to the Gaian body, our planet. So I have attempted a definition here of ecosomatics, which is that somatics is inseparable from ecological health, environmental justice, from activism, that we use embodiment and somatic principles to facilitate work and village building, to gardening, farming, healing, learning about ourselves, learning about one another. So I use the word body and soma a lot in my work and in this presentation. So when I do say the word body, we're talking about a fractal experience here. Sometimes I call it the triple body, because we have the soma, our experience of our individual body, which also can include experiences of our own ancestors who are speaking through us, because we're made of bones and blood and flesh that we inherited from our ancestors. So we might call that our body or our ancestral body. Then we have the social body, which would be our community or our body politic, or we can call the earth a third level of body, our larger Gaian body that we all are part of, which is also made of ancestors.
Nala, there's a request to go back to the ecosomatics slide from Amy.
Sure. Yeah, so there we can stay for a few minutes while I just describe a little bit more about the ancestral body. Is the way that we are woven in just like this image. Grief work and ancestor work go hand in hand. And I remember when that first dawned on me, because I was in grief ritual and realizing that I had such an overwhelming and huge amount of grief that I knew that this could not just be from my own lifetime. And then I realized, oh, hello, ancestors, there's intergenerational grief. And I had to learn how to turn and face what had happened in the past. And once I did that, things got really interesting, and the work has deepened into a whole new level. So what's so amazing about doing ancestor work, especially in times when our community is so broken, so splintered, so fractured, is that you can invite your well ancestors into your lives and do healing along your, we can do healing along our lineages and invite our ancestors to stand in community with us. Even if we're by ourselves, we can have a communal grief ritual with our ancestors present. And it's very powerful to do that and very needed right now. It's a way of extending our nervous system. So it's like that co-regulation that happens in a physical grief ritual when you, or even just when you were with a friend and something traumatic happened. If one friend's nervous system is calm and grounded and collected, then your nervous system tends to help the other person who's traumatized to regulate, to down regulate. And when you're in a group of people, that same thing is happening. It's very powerful and very needed function of community, because these are powerful experiences, traumas that people have gone through, and we can't handle them alone. And so I've had the great fortune of being present and also helping to facilitate lots of grief ritual in person, where huge amounts of the intergenerational trauma is able to be processed and moved through in a way that you could never do. It overwhelms any single person. So we're attempting to do that here via Zoom, but we don't have the benefit of being with one another's nervous systems. And that's where bringing in our experience of our ancestors, our well and wise ancestors, is incredibly helpful and needed for this process. So all of us have earth honoring, wise, loving, kind ancestors. No matter where you're from, it may seem to some of us like, oh, well, all my ancestors were, were traumatized from, from coming over from, on a boat from some other continent, right? But we're talking about ancestors all the way back, that we all come from thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of ancestors. And if you consider what came before human beings, if you consider plants and trees and animals and, even the stars as your ancestors, you can go back even further. But what I'm saying here is, just because we've had a lot of trauma in the past, let's just say 10, 15,000 years, a lot has been going on. That's less than 0.1% of human history. And so we all have people who were rooted into the earth, who had their ceremonial and prayer traditions, rites around initiation, rites around death, rites around birth and grief intact. And we can tap into those. Thich Nhat Hanh. each of our ancestors are alive in this moment. Each are present in our bodies. We are the living representations of our ancestors here. So ancestral recovery and healing is part of the process that we're all involved in here of decolonizing. We're upgrading our DNA. We're starting to acknowledge that we actually have not only a birthright to connect with our ancestral resources, but we also have a responsibility, because there are many of our, let's just say the most recent generations have lost some of these practices, and they need our help to get back into right relationship and become rooted into that ancestral terrain with the ancient ones. So when we say, oh, I lost my grandmother, another teacher, Stephen Jenkson, talks about, if you lost your keys, you'd probably look for them, right? You'd probably be upset at yourself and be like, gosh, how could I be so careless? And how can I'm never going to do this again, that kind of thing. But you'd give a really good effort to take a look. But yet we so easily lose I lost my mother this summer. This is the language that we use. And so we have to take that responsibility to understand that we do not have to lose our ancestors. So I am a professional whaler, kind of coming out of the closet here. Not here in specific, but just in this lifetime, that there have been, especially women, but all kinds of people have always had traditions where there were roles held in a village that were valued, that parties would happen, that weddings and funerals and celebrations of all kind, where people who were more sensitive, who could cry a little bit easier or wail, or their emotions were more easily accessible, would be intentionally brought into community gatherings to get things moving, to get the party going. I mean, Martine Pertel, another very profound teacher on grief, talks about a party was not considered a party unless there was a lot of weeping and wailing. There would be, everyone's crying, and then everyone's laughing, and everyone's crying, and then everyone's laughing. So this is why I was suggesting in the invitation to come to this event that people not regard this as something that's a slog, that we're actually going to have a liberating and ideally, enjoyable time when we wail together. So you can look back into the traditions of so many different cultures. Really, every culture on the globe has lamentation traditions. So we're here to depathologize grief. It's not a pathology. It's not a private affair. Our grief is collective. It's a skill. It's a process. It's more of a verb than a noun. It's not equivalent to sorrow, depression. It is a living, breathing practice. In the interest of time, I'm going to be kind of skipping through some of these slides so we can get to the actual ritual. But I just wanted to say that here, healing attachment is one of the things that we are doing in a grief ritual, especially when we're extending our nervous systems to include our ancestral body. Relearning how to connect there is one of these really necessary aspects of the healing that we're doing in this generation. It's not only healing our attachment with our family or our children. It's also healing our attachment wounds with our ancestors and with the earth. And the way that we do that is by moving towards places in our lineage where there's wellness. And we, just in the same way as if you were seeking healing with someone with the living, you're not going to start with someone who's dangerous or, someone who's mentally unwell. You start with, you go towards where there's wellness, and then you build on that. So I do a lot of ancestral healing with people, so I have a lot more to say about this, but we're going to just move along, and I'll take some questions here at the end real soon. So Malidoma Some, who is an incredible teacher who just passed away, I think it was last week. So just taking a moment to honor Malidoma, who was sent by his tribe, his ancestors from Africa, from Burkina Faso, to specifically bring grief work to the land of the dead, to this place where we are having such a difficult time with grieving and where we're so repressed. And Malidoma's name in Dagara means friends of the stranger, friends of the enemy. So there's like that interchangeable word, stranger and enemy. So just wanted to honor Malidoma for the incredible sacrifices that he and also Sobanfu, who has also passed now, brought to this continent. We're modifying rituals continually, but he did a huge amount to get that ball rolling here. And thank you, Malidoma Some. And may you be gathered into your ancestral field of deliciousness and belonging right now as you make your way. Blessings, Malidoma. He said, ritual is the most ancient way of binding a community together in close relationship with spirit. Ritual is a safe and effective tool to maintain the delicate balance between body and soul. So I come from an animist perspective, which means that our ancestors include not only humans, but all kinds of creatures, and even what we think of as not living, the wire and the copper and the plastic and the silicon of these computers are also, they also have a life. They are life. So we're giving gratitude to all of our relations in that way, respecting the personhood of the non-human world. Another world is possible, and doing this work is helping us make it possible. Oh, another world is not only possible, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Arundhati Roy. So I'm going to leave it there and take a couple of questions. Of course, if any of you want to continue working together after today, I welcome you to get in touch with me via my website, which is bewellnow.org. And thank you so much for your attention and for your listening. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Leave the recording running for this part?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Nala, I just want to make sure you know there was a lot of excitement on the chat as people were responding to the slides. So, and I'd love for you to, if folks who put your excitement on the chat would be willing to say that to Nala, if you're open to it, Nala, to hear the impact as well, if it's not just a question.
That would be so great. I could not see the chat at all. I don't know why. Mm.
Hey, Nala. I had a little bit of experience with whalers in that I heard stories of my grandmother hiring whalers every year to honor her departed husband. She lost her husband when she was really young, and she kept that up till she left the country.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
I would love to talk to you sometime about that. If you're open to that, I would love to hear more about
Sure,
that. I'm
sure.
studying these traditions. So yeah.
Mhm.
So I have a question in regards to working with ancestors. I guess I was doing a meditation for like 3 hours, and at some point it just felt right to start reaching out to my grandparents who had passed away and kind of invite them to like rest in my body, sort of thing, like inviting part of their spirit into me. And I never studied this at all and didn't know anything about it. It just felt right to do so. And I'm wondering if that is part of this, what you're talking about, the healing of the ancestors, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. There, as long as you are feeling, your nervous system can handle, it can be a lot to be sharing your body essentially with, another entity or a family member. But if you're feeling that that's not overwhelming you and blowing your circuits, then yeah. And I've been trained in a lot of intentional ways of doing this, so you can always reach out for help too. But yeah, just in a more general way, it's just more about making sure you feel safe and knowing that you at any time have that capacity and that boundary to say, and that's enough. And if you're working with a benevolent ancestor, they will immediately honor that boundary, like in 2 seconds. They'll step back. So just knowing that you have that power to set those boundaries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't think about it as being overwhelming. It felt comforting, as if to maintain the connection.
Yeah. Then I would go with it if it's feeling comforting. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad that you're doing that. And thank you for sharing that. I think a lot more of us have these experiences than we're willing to talk about in our overculture. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
We had a question.
Yeah.
Having a lot of anxiety about going into this, and that's coming from a lot of mental illnesses, and have been in a very thick depressive episode for the past 4 months. And today, of all the days, we're actually feeling regulated and calm and happy. So we arrange our schedule so we don't have to leave at 2. We're going to stay for the whole thing, but it's like this fear and this anxiety about, well, what is going to come up? Then we're not going to be happy. We have vehement emotions. Once they come out, they spiral out of control. So I don't know. There's a lot of fear about this.
Jessica, I see you nodding. Do you have some comment here?
I am nodding as I can relate, to be honest. So I'll say just a few thoughts about someone. I also practice keeping my emotions regulated. I also have slippery edges. I also professionally help people in mental health, so it's all of it. But my thought is to really honor that edge. I just want to say that again, honor that edge. But you may be surprised how much space there is to inhabit the edge without going all the way over. that there's more degrees of freedom in being here, but not necessarily opening what you don't feel competent to open. But we say lean in, and it's really intentional language. So my thought there, because this is my own practice, is to lean and then abide, right? Like the words kind of feel limited, but it's like just arrive somewhere. You don't have to push. Just arrive somewhere and expand and see how that feels. I hope that's helpful, because I think your question is really important, and I imagine others might benefit from hearing that. How is that to hear?
I think it's okay. It was kind of not relatable. One part where you said about like opening into something or like allowing something, that's what we were saying, like with the vehement emotions, it's like there is no control of like what's opened or closed, which was like pushing us to be like, well, maybe we shouldn't do this because we really don't want to open up this massive door of emotion and then can't pull it back. So what do you think, like, what do you think of that?
So I think the opportunity here, and I don't have any, judgment, or would not be insulted if you left the ritual, or if you even just decided to just witness or participate. But the invitation here, because we're so used to experiencing the grief coming over us and not having anyone else around, is that we can allow some of it to happen, but this time with one another. There's a big difference if you haven't felt that co-holding of this giant container of emotion, that now it's not only yours. For once, we don't get this opportunity to do this in community very often. So it's something that you might try. What we're going to do first is to go into small breakout rooms, right? And you can witness other people sharing things, and you can choose also maybe that you don't want to share, but it's almost nice to commiserate, to hear other people are really carrying some stuff. And then we'll come back into the larger group, and we'll hear just a few sample shares from people. You get the sense of like, wow, I'm not the only one who feels like I'm losing my mind. That in itself is so healing, and what sets this apart from just your normal raking through the coals of your emotions that maybe you're doing, far too often, in your life. I feel like that in my life, it's a lot all the time. So this is one of those times when you get to be with other people and notice, oh, I'm a little less alone. But I honor whatever choices you make, dear. Yeah.
Thank you. That was incredible, talking about this is like a special container of everyone to be here and all of that. I don't know what it was about that, but that really just like solidified our confidence, not being scared.
Good, dear one. Thank you. So let's start to head into learning about what we're going to do next. Do you want to describe, Jessica, what we're about to do?
Sure. So
then you can turn off the recording, Alan. Thank you all for your attention and listening.